Today we're hanging out with Chris Derose of Bitcoin Uncensored and Peter Ryan of CoinDesk. We're going to talk about the philosophy behind blockchain, where it's been and where it's going. Let's do it.
It started in a very shadowy way online, in a very shadowy forum of cryptocurrency. Well, at the time, I guess they weren't cryptocurrency, but they were cypherpunks. They were leading into the cryptocurrency movement, the early forefathers who knew they wanted something like this, but they didn't know what it would be or how it would form. And a lone, mysterious person who went by the moniker SATOSHI NAKAMOTO showed up and presented this finished product, told everybody this is a form of digital gold, and let everybody start using it in a way that was very strange. It was mined, which was the source of a lot of intrigue and confusion, and it was something that didn't have a center. There wasn't really any person in charge. The code was written, but it took on a life of its own, and from there, well, it's been kind of history, as anybody and anyone has and can join the network and provide value and offer meaning, really, to this invention.
Sure. Well, help us understand this whole value thing. Like a lot of people, can understand how prices work, supply and demand. But in terms of Bitcoin, something that's digital, something where it's contingent upon a community of people and it's dynamic, it's constantly changing. How can you help frame it for folks who might understand? Yeah.
I think that even experts don't know what value is sometimes. A very ephemeral idea. Yeah. This notion of some sort of social debt or some degree of social power, and it's constantly changing in society. It started in many ways in commodities. It started with early societies in the forms of seashells and rocks, really. And in the modern era, it progressed to forms of credit, and the credit would be written by a bank or it would be written by a city, but really it was written by society in many ways. And we have then mutated into paper-based currencies. Yep. Paper that you give to somebody, and it's kind of a magical paper. It's imbued with weird symbols and imagery, and that person feels as if they've been compensated for their sacrifice. And that leads up into today now, where we have paperless versions that are very common with the dollar, but now in ways that aren't common with the dollar. In terms of Bitcoin, it's these ones and zeros that have this special essence where people receive it and feel like they've been made whole for what is very often sweat and tears and hard sacrifice.
In the beginning, it was in terms of like the type of people who were really starting to invest in this thing and getting excited about it. We're leaning toward more libertarian anarcho-capitalist, philosophies. Could you tell us a little bit about that and about maybe how it's shifted over the years and what you've seen being a part of it for so long?
Yeah, well, it was interesting at first because it was the only existence of its kind, and it attracted a lot of libertarian types. This was in the wake of the financial crisis. Faith in banks was low, and there was a lot of public outrage over what had happened during the crisis. And so it attracted, I think, really a lot of, at first, certainly the cypherpunks, but then the sort of Tea Party types, libertarians, the followers of Mises, economists of a sort that really liked the gold idea in a digital form. Yeah. And there was a lot of conservatism in the community at first, and there were a lot of community tropes and ideas that I think today are perhaps even a little bit quaint compared to what has happened since. But in those early times, we didn't really have any other blockchains but this one, and it seemed that everybody rallied around it as a form of digital gold. LITECOIN was the second blockchain, and it itself was the silver to Bitcoin's gold, which was reasonable enough at the time. If this was digital gold, then we need a digital silver, and who knows what else after that. And that was successful, and to this day it still exists, and it's a very active community as well. But it was itself an extension of that same sort of morality and group values that was the gold group. And in my estimation, I don't think that it was even as significant as what came later. ETHEREUM came in 2013, and it was itself the first ICO, which was a major deviation in the way that things were done prior. And that was a very different kind of blockchain that attracted very different kinds of users.
What's a typical reason for why one would try to start a new community or start, launching a new coin in and of itself? What are each of them trying to solve?
Well, in the early days, the problems were as simple as sending value and storing value, which I think is the base layer of any blockchain in use today. And so it has to be said that there was a lot of nefarious uses at first. I think that where there is digital gold, there are digital pirates. And so in many ways, an economy was born that was a bit shadowy and that attracted certainly the drug dealers and the cyber crimes that are oftentimes in the news. But that wasn't the extent of it. Like any kind of money, I think you're going to have that element. But that was the earliest form of economy, was people who were not being serviced in the mainstream institutions, but they were highly technically literate, and that was the first form of commerce. Now, when Ethereum came, we had a few new tricks in the arsenal of blockchain, smart contracts being at the top of that list. And the smart contracts were a bit of a solution without a problem at first. And it seemed as if this functionality of being able to run programs on your blockchain rather than just send money would open up a new world of opportunity. And that attracted a different crowd. I think that what we saw there was a lot of the Silicon Valley types who were less oriented with the libertarian ethos and with the gold ethos, and more oriented towards venture building and product building and application building.
I see. Yo, Peter. Hey. What's going on? How's it going?
What's up, Peter? Hey.
So we were just talking about decentralization, blockchains, Bitcoins. We heard you've been doing some research. What's in the data? Like, what do you see?
Yeah, so, I've been surveying a lot of the community within crypto, and what we've been finding is that, when you look at a lot of the roots and a lot of the majority of the base, you see it's libertarian, it's conservative, it's a lot of people that are fervent about the idea of decentralized money. We need to get rid of central banking. We need to, erode the power of the government. And so there's a very, strange, counterculture that is within the base of the cryptocurrency community. However, while that was the origin and early adopter set that came through, more recently we're seeing that a lot more mainstream people are getting in, especially after the Q4 2017 rally where Bitcoin hit about nearly $20,000. A lot of people piled in, and they're not actually sharing those same countercultural beliefs. They're more likely to be centrist or liberal or even socialist. And so what we're seeing is that there's really these two groups really solidifying of very ardent, anarchist, or just people that want to shirk the system, the traditional way of doing things. And then on the other hand, you have these people that don't really have that and just want like a cool new app or a cool new way to transfer money around. And if that has a connection to government, they don't really care, or they don't really see the layers upon layers of political ideology that's behind all of this. And so ultimately, these two camps will have to recognize one another as different, even though they're in the same industry right now, and they'll ultimately come into conflict saying, what are our goals, and what are the ends that we want to get to?
So I think that because this is decentralized, we are having to find our way in terms of authority in many different ways. And because nobody really knows where this technology is going to draw its line, it seems that what is Bitcoin is in many ways a matter of what people feel is Bitcoin. We know some basics. There's 21 million coins. We know that this is a value sending protocol that started with SATOSHI. But there's little leadership groups that have formed, and in the Bitcoin group, we have two now. One leadership group is Bitcoin Core, and the other one is Bitcoin Cash. And depending on how you feel, you will find one or the other to be more authentic, or that speaks to you and your values. And so that's been a major issue in the space, and I think it's a positive development, because in decentralized models, we don't have a government to rely on to strike its gavel down and say, this is what you believe. And it's really a bottom-up movement where we say, this is what we believe, and people of a like mind have chosen one camp or another in these movements.
The analogy I like to use is pizza. Like, pizza is all over the place. There's like tons of pizzerias. I can go to Lombardi's down the street, I can go uptown, I can go to Joe's Pizza. You have all these different places saying, we serve pizza, we have the authentic pizza, but no one actually owns or has the official right to say, we are the pizza. No one else can say they are the pizza. There are common, ingredients to a pizza and shapes to it that we all recognize, that you need dough, sauce, cheese. It needs to be round. And so you can start seeing there is a consistency there, but even that breaks down to a degree when you start to have square pizza, when you start to have pizza without sauce, pizza without cheese, or ingredients and toppings that should never go on a pizza that are there, but one shop does it. So all these things are experimenting with pizza, yet they are still all pizza. And so similarly with all these different, Bitcoins that are out there, nobody actually has the official right to say what is Bitcoin. There is only the ability of those purporting to be Bitcoin to say they're Bitcoin, and others to infer what exactly they believe is the true and authentic Bitcoin. And even when you expand outside of Bitcoin to every cryptocurrency, they are all blockchains. They're all cryptocurrencies. They are all parts of this. Some of them have sardines and pineapples on them, and some are just the plain cheese, tomato sauce, and bread.
So you mentioned at the onset of this whole thing that it was operating kind of in a shadowy context, and that, obviously with anything good, there's always a bad side to it. What are some of the main concerns right now in these communities, and where we're going to be going in the future? Because there are a ton of concerns, to general public. So.
Yeah, so because there's no regulation, we're developing a lot of dubious ideas at times. I think there's a lot of people who take a little bit too much liberty with the freedom that they've been given, and that kind of stuff makes the headlines, and for good reason. It's disconcerting. But in many ways, I think it's also a bit disingenuous to blame blockchain for some of that activity, because you're always going to have that element in society. And with great power comes great responsibility, and there's unfortunately some people who have taken the extent of that to a degree that's left some bad taste in people's mouth. It's understandable, but these debates supersede blockchain. I understand that for a lot of people there's a fear about the power here, and so there's a focus on these things. But in many cases, these debates have preceded blockchain by many, many years, and I think that, though concerning, I'd like to see even blockchain regulate itself in these ways. We've done it before. I don't see why we can't do it again.
Peter, you have any 2 cents on that?
Yeah, I think in terms of the dangers that we're facing, I think that the regulatory weight is definitely looming, and ultimately those that find their way into the embrace of the state might find themselves in a preferential position opposed to others that have been more antagonistic and find themselves at the other end of the proverbial gun, and also the literal gun, if they are outlawed, especially those conducting pure censorship-resistant transactions, where we've seen that much of some more engaged users within the community that aren't just holding, that aren't just trading on exchanges, those that actually use this more in a day-to-day and paying for goods and services like cents, they do it because they are barred from traditional means of finance. We saw this in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, where Palestinians are barred from a lot of traditional banking systems, and CoinDesk actually looked into it and found there was quite a attraction to Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies being used to break through that censorship that's going on there. And when you expand further out to other marginalized communities and political dissidents around the world, you see that the traditional finance system is not opposed to censoring people off their platforms, similarly like we're seeing in a lot of other speech-related platforms. And ultimately, those people will be, they won't be a person without a flag, but they'll be a person without a currency. And cryptocurrencies have the potential to be the currency of those people. And ultimately, thus the users and developers and business owners within the space will have to come to terms with the fact that one day they'll wake up and they'll see this is our most engaged user, and we have to decide if we like that or if we don't like that.
Yeah. So guys, kind of heard a lot about what the current state is. Where do we go from here? What are some of the things that you guys think will happen in the next couple of years?
I'm very excited by the governance that's happening here in this space. We look out online at these problems in governance, in social media sites and whatnot, and in many ways I think that there isn't a notion of citizenship that goes with a traditional website. And there seems to be a notion of citizenship here in blockchain, where you are a beholden member to your community. And my hope is that what we will find is some level of para-national allegiance, maybe, where you have an online nation where the insufficiency of government is met with this technology and provides solutions to these problems. That's really where I think there's going to be a lot of power. And I even hope that these societies online will exceed just the sort of rote end of things and perform regulatory services in a way that makes all of society better.
Peter?
Yeah, I think there ultimately has to be some sort of ingratiation within the traditional regulatory system. I think there should be a hardline stance with certain tenets that the blockchain community wants to pervade and not just get subsumed as a skin that is placed over what is the traditional monetary system that we have. That certainly means that there'll be some meetings that business leaders will have to go to, and developers in Washington, D.C. or other capitals around the world, potentially, but that probably means not partying with former heads of state and, becoming the, the poster child of central bank facelift 2.0.
Yeah, sure. Actually, I have one more curious question. So, what does this mean for like human flourishing? And the idea of identity and community is so personal. It's something that we express in our daily lives, the choices that we make, and how we dress, how we speak, where we decide to live. I know Bitcoin and cryptocurrency isn't necessarily associated with these things like identity and community, but what do you think it means on a broad scale? Even you can answer it philosophically as well. For the ways in which humans are able to express and be more authentic. We talked about authenticity in terms of currency, but an authentic human being.
In like a science fiction sense, I really find a degree of inspiration in The Matrix, where we're kind of in these little bubbles, but our real selves are in our heads. And I think for many of us in the real world, I think there are a lot of limitations to life that are not going to have to be the case anymore with this technology. I think that you look at the youth that are spending so much of their time online in these virtual worlds that are creating an identity for themselves in the virtual world that is more real than anything else that they feel to be true about themselves. And I see that part of life can very much be augmented by what we're doing here, if not become sort of the fabric by which all of those online identities are woven. And that seems to be happening. I see now already people who are in one blockchain migrating all of their social connections and their value to other platforms because of the nature of decentralization, and carrying that identity around the internet with them.
Awesome.
What I often see is when newbies get exposed to cryptocurrency and start understanding what it is the potential, they actually start to undergo some sort of transformation where they start to identify that there is a system that they live in, and that it is a system that is not inherent and is not eternal, that it can be changed, and that the breakage from the traditional finance system also allows them to have a breakage with traditional political systems or spiritual systems or anything that might be something that they've been indoctrinated into, that they might not have the knowledge that they have the choice to do something else or experience a new way of life or a new way of looking at the world.
One, I hope that a lot more people understand that blockchain technology can be applied to so much more than just cryptocurrencies and what people often hear about Bitcoin. So I also hope that governments and policymakers have an open stance on blockchain technology in general, and make sure that they take the time to really learn about the cost, the benefits, the consequences, and make sure that we're not hindering an opportunity to make people's lives better. Because for all the interviews that I've had with folks, people are being very intentional, very smart, very cost effective, and also working a lot with policies and regulations to make sure they're doing things right, you know. So at the beginning of this entire thing, you know, I thought that it was just going to be somewhat of a you know, kind of a nerdy research project, you know, because my background in data visualization, I'm just gravitate towards these things in general. But like, I learned that there was so much more to it than just like the technical side. I mean, I'm also a dancer, so I understand what culture and community is, and I definitely saw that in all of what these guys are doing. So with culture, with community, and with tech, like combined, I feel like it's just a powerhouse for unlocking like human potential, and that's what I look forward to seeing.
Throughout history, inventions have spurred major political and social change. From the printing press, to the television, to the computer, and now, the blockchain. Could there be implications for healthcare, military, artificial intelligence, or revolutions? Till next time.